could we be given warning at the beginning of a programme if there's going to be anything about the Beatles, as all Beatle fans can make sure to listen, and have a chance to ring up other fans to make sure they are also listening.
Hi everybody, this is John here. This is Paul, George
and Ringo.
And we're very happy to be on your programme once again.
Welcome to what I think is going to be an incredible show. This is the Beatles, The Prisoner Connection. Everyone here is a big fan of the series, and one of the people here actually is associated with Portmeirion. So this is really going to be cool. Anyway, first of all is Keith Badman, who was on with me recently. He's an archivist. He's done Beatles stuff. He did the Beatles anthology. He's done just a lot of different things. And hello, Keith.
Good seeing you again, speaking to you, Steve, and thank you again for inviting me on this fabulous program you're on.
Thank you. And on the right is Meurig Jones. And Meurig, I didn't get your title with Portmeirion.
I'm the location manager here, so I look after the attraction side and VIP tours and filming and photo shoots. And so it's a great job. It's lots of variety, and no 2 days the same, which is always fun.
You actually live at Portmeirion?
No, my partner Maggie thinks I do because she calls the place Portmeirig because I'm here more than home. But no, I live actually across the estuary, but I am the prisoner because I look at Portmeirion from the other side, from home.
Wow. Keith and Meurig are going to fill us in on Beatle prisoner connections. Keith and I did some of that in the last show that I did with him, and you can find that on YouTube. But we're going to go into it a lot deeper today, and we have some things to show you, or at least discuss. Let's get started. Keith, go ahead and start.
The one that many people think with the Prisoner Beatles connection, of course, is All You Need Is Love, which is episode 17, Fallout, of course. And I remember the first time I saw that in the 70s rerun, I was amazed that there was the Beatles in it. And the story I got, in fact, actually, I'd rather Meurig to tell that story because it's incredible the deal that they got. Meurig will fill you in on that, absolutely.
Meurig, go ahead.
The Prisoner is something that Portmeirion is incredibly proud of, in that this year is the 60th anniversary of the filming here, September 1966. Wow. And next year is the 60th of it being shown, 29th of September 67. So that is some great anniversaries coming up for us. Before that, our connection with Patrick McGowan started in 1959, when he came to film 7 scenes for Danger Man here, Secret Danger Man in the States. And of those 7 scenes, 6 of them we were Italy. Fair enough. And then the tower past the hotel, they thought that looks a bit Chinese in style. So there's one scene of a little Chinese boat being rolled past it. So it's fantastic for us that we could be Italy and China within 100 meters of each other. It's important to remember that this was pre-Prisoner. And he then remembered Portmeirion. And when Danger Man came to an end in 1966, he Luke Vane, who ran ITV, didn't want to lose him. And he said, have you got an idea to do something else? He said, yeah, I've got an idea. Spy resigns, kidnapped, wakes up somewhere, tries to escape. And he remembered Portmeirion. And what he wanted out of Portmeirion was the architectural ambiguity of the place, the fact that we could be maybe Eastern Bloc or Mediterranean. But also, he knew colour TVs were coming in, and this place would look good in colour. So he came to see Clough. Clough was the designer and owner of Portmeirion. And to say that, would you be interested in us filming a series here? And Clough said, yes, of course. And I'm sure neither Patrick nor he thought that this wonderful series would still be so popular 60 years on and still brings thousands of people here. So the All You Need Love collection that was told to me by Catherine McGowan, Patrick's daughter, who said that the Beatles were huge fans of Patrick McGowan because he was the biggest TV star of the day. And having done Help, they approached him to see if he would be interested in helping them, giving them some ideas to do a spy film that they wanted to do next. They had this meeting and dinner and a few drinks, I would imagine. On the night, they thought it was a good idea, and there was things that they could do together. I've always imagined they all woke up with hangovers, and of course it never happened. But in that meeting, he got them to release the rights for one of their songs. So in the last episode of The Prisoner Fallout, as he's walking out of the village, there's a jukebox playing All You Need Is Love. And they paid £45 for the rights for that. And which was nothing really, because they never allowed their music to be used in things that they weren't really involved with. It was one of the very few occasions that they did. But they did it because they were huge fans of Patrick McGowan. And I think he could be quite persuasive, possibly. But of course, it's wonderful to have that in it. For Portmeirion to have that connection with both sides. We've had a long connection with the Beatles here. And of course, Patrick McGowan in Danger Man and then The Prisoner.
Actually, there's another TV connection, is that he was in The Scarecrow of Romney Marsh. And in America, they broadcast that the same night, in fact, the same time as the Ed Sullivan Show was on here. So yeah, I know that was really a trip. I watched the Ed Sullivan Show, but I also saw the reruns of Scarecrow because I quite like that. That was a great little series. Tell everybody what your job is.
I'm the location manager at Portmeirion. I've been here for nearly 23 years now, and I feel quite honoured to have a job that is so different. I look after filming here, photo shoots, VIP tours. It's a great variety of organised events as well. So, I was quite shocked when I first came here because being a huge Beatles fan forever, coming here knowing some of the Beatles stories, but then, of course, learning a lot more by talking to people who've been here a long time and people who were then luckily sending us stuff. But I'm surprised that really Portmeirion weren't or didn't think it was anything of any interest to anybody. And I was thinking, no, this is the biggest band in the world, who will always be, in my eyes, the biggest band in the world. And we have these unusual little quirky things that have happened over the years with the Beatles. I'm honoured, really, to have been given the opportunity. I've already organised a few Beatles and George's evenings over the years. Frida Kelly came to do a talk. Tony Bramwell, brilliant. And I so much love that because people don't really know some of these unusual stories.
Frida is just a wonderful person.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Keith told me that the rights to All You Need Is Love, it was because John actually made the phone call or something. Was John involved in it somehow?
I was always under the impression, because I was speaking to, no doubt, people that Meurig knows, that it was John who was really keen to have the song in the programme. And it was just done quickly. As I said, they had a meeting and it was finalised over the phone. It was something as quick as that. And again, £45, which I think we'll all agree that most of that £45 would have gone on solicitors, lawyers and everything. The Beatles are quite happy to be associated with this new Patrick McGowan series because they clearly loved him. And as Meurig says, Patrick was easily one of the biggest UK stars at the time. And Danger Man was just superbly successful and popular. And the Beatles wanted happy to be involved with it. But the same as if you listen to the Epic Monkeys episodes, a copy.
I knew you would bring up the Monkeys somehow.
Yeah, the Monkeys episode, A Copying Too Frequent. You have a short glimpse of Good Morning. So you can see how the Beatles are really keen to be involved with things they love, such as the Monkeys, of course, and, of course, Patrick the Prisoner. Yeah, absolutely. And it was Meurig that told me £45, which I thought was amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. Keith, I'm going to throw it to you now.
About the Beatles and the Prisoner?
Yes.
My God. I actually think, and again, the story, to be honest with you, the story came from Meurig when we visited last week. As I said, you get to the position where you think you know everything, you think you've heard it all. But no, Meurig was just telling Kay and I stories that we just didn't know. We were like, it's amazing, we didn't know. So I would like Meurig now to tell the amazing story about George's Midnight Jam, which I was amazed by. And it's only fair that Meurig tells the story because I wasn't aware of this until Meurig told us last week. Mm-hmm. Yeah, April 11th, 69.
Yeah, that date's etched in my mind now because I couldn't believe it either when we were approached by a lady who worked here in 1969 called Lynn Prest, who then in 1970 emigrated to Australia. And she then contacted us last year and said, I've got some photos of Portmeirion from when I worked there. Would you like them? And we said, yeah, of course. We love seeing old photos of the place anyway. So she sent them over. And in the middle of all these lovely photos were two things that, again, made me fall off my seat in excitement, really. One was a signed menu by Alan Clark of the Hollies. The one that really made my jaw hit the floor was a signed menu by George Harrison, 11th of April, 1969. And what's amazing and lucky with this is the fact that the menus would change every day and the date was on the bottom of the menu. So we can tie it down to that exact date. Oh, this is brilliant. So then I said, in my own mind, what was happening on the 11th of April, 69 in Beatles. But I went online and what was happening in Beatles World, 11th of April, 69, Get Back was being released.
Yeah.
And then that just blew my mind really because George was here when they released that. And I'm not an expert like Keith is, but I always thought the Beatles would be down there in London promoting Get Back.
Yeah.
But no, George was here. And it was unbelievable, but it's undoubtedly true because of the date on the menu. So I emailed Lynn Press back and said, have you got any memories of being here on the 11th of April 69 and George Harrison being there? And she said, oh yes, I have. And the staff accommodation at the time was in the building behind the Dome, which is 30 metres from Gatehouse. And she said, we all went back to the staff accommodation. We were tired, long, hard days working. And it was well after midnight, so we went to bed. And next thing, there was a noise outside. And we thought, well, what's happening outside? This is well past midnight. What's happening? So they got dressed again and they walked out from the Dome, going straight towards the noise. I say noise like that. It was coming from the garden of Gatehouse. And it was George jamming with Clive Epstein, Brian's brother. And they said, oh, sorry, don't disturb you. And they just walked away. But isn't that amazing that on that night, on that weekend, George was here and he was having a sort of time out and in a place that he loved. Of all the Beatles who came here, and all the Beatles did come here, but George came back more than most because he really got what Clough was trying to do here. Clough was, I wanted to show that you could have fun with architecture. So there's tricks on the buildings, but he was thinking outside the box, but he was also, the most important thing, he wanted to show you could work with nature. So many of the buildings here are built right on cliff edges because you can't look at the building without looking at what it's standing on, because there was a strong feeling at the time when Clough started this in the 1920s, any building work you did, you were taking away from the beauty of nature. And he said, no, you can work with nature to create something special. And I think of all the Beatles and many of the famous people who come here, George really got that. And I think that's why he came back so often.
You also sent me something with John and Yoko.
Yeah.
A postcard signed by John and Yoko. It was addressed to Ringo.
Right, so that's the 23rd of June, 69. And that's when John, Yoko, and Kakuyoko Julian they got in the car and they decided to go on holiday. So they were going to go to Scotland, and they did go to Scotland eventually, but they came via Wales. And they came to a little town called Aberdyfi, which is in mid-Wales. And they stopped at the Tremedden Hotel, which is a lovely, imposing hotel up on the cliff edge looking down over Cardigan Bay. And they went in there. And the two stories I was told by two people who work there, two separate people. One was that they were looking for a room, but they were turned away. One was that they didn't want the hassle of having a Beatle stay there. The second one was that they weren't dressed adequately enough because it's quite a posh hotel, a lot of golfers and stuff there. But they did have lunch there, and then the owners of the Surreal sent them to Tywyn. And the third side of that same story is also another person told me they were just turned away because the hotel was full. So I don't know. I will never know which one of those is the truth. Maybe it's a mix of all three. But they were sent to the Cold Arms Hotel in Tywyn. And it's a lovely old hotel. Unfortunately, it was falling into disrepair. So they were talking about pulling it down. And of course, people like myself who've now been fighting to keep this hotel there because of the connection that John and Yoko stayed there on the 23rd of June, 69. They were in the Mini. They went to Tywyn, just 4 miles north of Aberdyfi. They went to the Corbett Arms Hotel. The Mini was playing up. John took the Mini to a garage, Gray Jones garage, which is all on High Street. And they did some work on the car, and the car was okay then. I spoke to the son of Grace Jones, who I knew quite well. And I said, have you any memories of this? And he said, yeah, because his father ran the garage. And he said, oh, yes. He said, I was in college at the time. And I came home from college on Friday. And my father, with a big smile, said, you'll never guess who came in this week. And it was John with his Mini. Anyway, they stayed in the Corbin Arms Hotel. John would have a cigarette and he sat on the stairs. And he asked the receptionist if she would go and buy him more cigarettes and buy him a postcard. And she went out and came back. And the postcard was of a picture of Prince Charles, as he was at the time, because this was only a week or 10 days before the messenger in Carnarvon. And then he wrote the card, the photo of the card I sent you, and he sent that to Ringo. That card and that photo came from Ringo's book, Postcards from the Boys. So that's where it came from. And then there's this wonderful photograph of them all sat on the lawn, the back lawn of the Corbin Arms Hotel. And there's two versions of that. There's a cropped photo of just them, and there's also a wider photo showing Beacon Hill behind it. And it's definitely on the lawn of the Corbin Arms Hotel. And it was just this wonderful thing, because I was in Tywyn. I'm from Tywyn, and my house was between Aberdyfi and Tywyn. So I would probably, in summer holidays, I would probably have been playing in the garden. And I'm thinking that John Lennon drove past in his Mini. But it was wonderful to the fact that they stayed in Tywyn of all places. I believe the reason they came, they were looking possibly to buy the house in the wilds of Wales. And that's the reason that they came via Aberdyfi and Tywyn there. But it was fantastic for this. And how wonderful, isn't it, that somebody actually took that photo as well, because it's a lovely document of the fact that they were so close to us. On Portmeirion's side, we were also told that they possibly came from Tywyn then the following day to Portmeirion because of the EP connection, and then to Liverpool. But we don't know that, and I guess we'll never know now. There's no photographic evidence that ever happened. But if they got to Liverpool, they changed the car from the Mini to a Maxi. They went to Scotland, of course, they had his crash. So that's why he was hospitalised for a couple of days, and that's why he was going back down to London for the recording sessions.
That picture you sent of George Harrison in the very lavish room, he's being interviewed for the anthology, and those interviews were done at Portmeirion, weren't they?
They were, yeah. He stayed for a couple of days, and he had two birthday parties. He had one with us, he had one in Liverpool. Yes, he was filmed in our mirror room, and what I love about that photo is him sat in the seats that he sat on are still there, but there's four of them with arms on. Now we don't know which one he sat on. So if you ever come and see us, Steve, we'll just have to sit on all four, like Keith did when he was there, to make sure that you sat in one of the ones that George sat in. The seat is backed up against the window, the camera was low down, and then it looks up at George, and with the window behind him, and you see the Tower of Portmeirion in the background there. He was also filmed in the other corner of the same room, which isn't an easy room to film in, because it is all mirrors in it. But anyway, they managed to do it. And we've got a lovely photo of George sat by the fireplace there as well.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, is that the one with the receipt?
That's right, yeah. So basically, that's a part of the guest book. And he writes George Harrison his address, and he puts down nationality, Iranian, remarks, fab.
One of the photos you sent really blew me over, and it's Wilfred Bramble, who played the grandfather in A Hard Day's Night. And from what Keith was telling me, Bramble was a big fan of Portmeirion too.
He was. I think basically what Portmeirion, it's difficult nowadays to think about homosexuality as being illegal and persecuted. And Portmeirion has always been a safe haven for gay people. This goes back to the wartime, when Noel Coward came here and he wrote Blithe Spirit in one of our rooms in 1941. Yeah, so Clough met him in London, September 1940. He said he wanted to write a comedy, Britain Needs a Laugh, but I can't sleep because the Blitz. Clough invited him to Portmeirion. He came and he stayed in the block next to the hotel, which is Anchor and Fountain. So Fountain 2 is the top, Fountain 1 the bottom. He came with Joyce Carey, the actress. She started off in the top one. He was in the bottom one. She was learning lines for a play in the West End that she was doing, but she was walking backwards and forwards and annoying him. So they swapped rooms because he couldn't concentrate. And he wrote Blithe Spirit in 5 days in Fountain 2. And we still get authors coming here now saying, I want to stay where Noel Coward stayed. I want to get some of the vibe he had. I don't know if there's any vibe left after all these years, but it's a great room. We've kept it pretty much as it was with his writing bureau back in the day. Yeah. But so it was a place where gay people could feel safe. I think that was one of the main reasons that Brian quite possibly came here. I believe he had family in the area. So he may well have come here, we think from 1960 onwards. And yeah, he was a regular fan and would occasionally bring these wonderful superstars to come and see us.
Keith mentioned in our interview about Brian Epstein being there.
So what Meurig showed us was the quarters where Brian stayed. And again, what I thought was absolutely amazing, again, Meurig will tell us more precisely. You had all the cupboards that are in the room now. They were Brian's cupboards, weren't they, Meurig?
They were. So what happened was he would stay in the hotel, and then in the early 60s, unfortunately, I can't give an exact date of when it happened, but because there was a hotel fire in 1981, and we lost some of the detail of certain things happening. But in the early 60s, Clough couldn't be bothered to sell all the self-catering cottages weekly, so some of them went on a short-term lease, and the Epstein family took Gatehouse as their holiday home. And Brian, being so fashion conscious, was complaining to Clough there wasn't enough storage for his clothes there. Clough wasn't bothered because Brian and Clive had taken a lease in the place. So Brian designed, commissioned and paid for the fitted wardrobes that are in the master bedroom in Gatehouse. And they're still there now. And which is incredible. After all these years that you could stay in Gatehouse even now and put your clothes where quite possibly all the Beatles put their clothes, because it was the main double fitted wardrobes in the master bedroom there. He also complained to Clough that the dining room was too small for him to have a lavish party. He was quite a party animal, I believe. And so Clough extended the dining room out a little bit to have a bigger dining room to a bigger party. And we went in there, didn't we, Keith? And it's got a massive window there overlooking the estuary. It's an amazing location for the house. And, one of the photos I also sent over was when Tony Brownell was with us in 2020, and we had fish and chips in the dining room of Gatehouse. Because we thought this is something that Tony never been there with Brian, of course, but he'd heard the stories about them coming to Portmeirion. And I've got such fond memories now as well to have Tony with us there. And yeah, but of course in the garden outside the dining room was where George and Clive were jamming on the 11th of April 69.
Imagine. And also what is also interesting as well was that Brian was staying there when the eruption in America come out about John's misquote, about the Beatles bigger than Jesus Christ. So it was at Portmeirion, and they had to fly to Chicago.
Yeah. So one of the photos I said as well, of course, is the famous photo, I guess, of Brian and George Martin on the lawn of the hotel with the estuary behind them. And of course, it all kicked off with John's quote, and he tried to diffuse it by phone from Portmeirion, and it wouldn't diffuse. The story was too big, so then he had to cut his holiday short, and go to America. So yeah, but another historic and wonderful photograph.
Are you at Portmeirion right now?
I am. Yeah.
Ooh! Any chance you can take your webcam and point it out the window?
I can't take the webcam. I have my fixed PC, unfortunately, but just out the window there, that's the dome where
is it?
Linfest stayed, yeah, and Gatehouse is just over there. We're within 20 metres of these historical buildings.
Melbourne played.
Paul and Ringo, have either of them been there?
I spoke to Julia Baird, John's sisters also, who told me that they came here pre-Beatles. They would stay with Auntie Nell in Plas Canol, the farm above us. They would camp and they would jump over the wall to get into Portmeirion. That's what she told me. Paul has been here, but not in my time. But Mike, his brother, comes here often, and I'm quite friendly with Mike. But definitely three. So George and John and Paul were here on one occasion, but we don't know when.
Okay. Wow. God, that's so cool. Keith, did you have something you wanted to say?
I could listen to Meurig for hours. It's just so fascinating. Meurig was telling us so many great stories, and because not only is it up to the Beatles or 60s, The Prisoner, you've got all the stories beyond. And Meurig, do you want to tell your great story about the Cape Club?
Yeah. This is only a bit of fun, because the Checkmate episode of The Prisoner is one of the most iconic ones, where they dress up in capes. They do play the human chess. He's invited to join the game for the Queen. He does, and then one of his teammates does an illegal move, so the heavies come in and drag him off, and he tells the Queen what's all that about, and she says, you're not allowed to do illegal moves. You're supposed to conform and fit in. And it's such an iconic episode. And we still have the Prisoner Convention here every April now, of course. So yes, you can come here, Steve. Come, Steve and Keith, next year. Come next April. You can dress up in the capes. You can reenact the human chess game. We have a lot of fun.
We'll be there.
Lovely. And then in 2013, I had a phone call from Paul Weller, who phoned and said, can you supply us with prisoner capes? We'd like to use them as a photo prop. And I said, yes, I'm sure I can. So I went down the prisoner shop, and because we used to sell them, they'd sold out, and they said, we're not going to get any more. Nobody really wants them. And I said, well, you sold out. I think people do want them. So anyway, I got our seamstress to make me 10, and I took them to Manchester Apollo, and the Paul Weller band came on stage wearing them. So again, my jaw hit the floor. I took loads of photos. I got home here, 1:30 in the morning, and the phone rings, and it was Paul Weller on the phone. We love the capes, but you've only given us 4, and there's 6 in the band, and the other 2 are a bit annoyed. Can we have some more? Yeah. So I went to Wolverhampton the following night. I took more capes down. I took a rubber balloon down, and there's footage of this on YouTube of them coming on stage, wearing the capes and throwing the balloon into the audience. And I spoke to him about why The Prisoner. And he said, The Prisoner. We all loved The Prisoner, especially sort of the punk new wave musicians or the more rebellious side of musicians, because basically it was fight the system. It was 2 fingers to society. Don't let Big Brother win. Yeah. And of course, they all really appreciated that. 2 other stories in a similar vein. I took Steve Harley of Cockney Rebel around, and he was a huge Prisoner fan. And he said he knew. So, you can tell straight away the people who just say, I'm a Prisoner fan, who maybe watched 1 or 2 episodes, to the people who are really watched every episode many times. And Steve was one of those. And he said, you do know that me and Mark Bolan used to go and get a Chinese takeaway to go home to watch The Prisoner every week when it was on. I thought, that's such a lovely story. Mark Bolan of T-Rex, and Steve having a Chinese takeaway to watch The Prisoner. And the third story, which I absolutely adore, is Glenn Matlock of the Sex Pistols came here. Again, huge Prisoner fan. And his lasting memory of The Prisoner was the punks in particular loved it because it was fight the system. So much so that in the height of punk, 1977, there was a cinema in Camden playing 6 episodes overnight. It started at 11 p.m. until 5 in the morning. And they all the Bromley contingents went. So half of them went as punks, half of them went dressed as prisoner characters. They watched all 6 episodes. They came out at 5 in the morning. There'd been a massive snowfall. And he said it was the most surreal snowball fight I've ever had at 5 in the morning on Camden High Street. Punks against prisoner characters. So I've carried it on, and I've got, I think, 82 cape holders at the moment who are they're mainly musicians, but some sort of musicians and stuff as well, who are basically fans of Portmeirion and The Prisoner. So it's a pleasure when they come here. I get a cape made, and they get a badge and a certificate and stuff. So it's only a bit of fun, but it's amazing how this wonderful cult TV series in the 60s is still in people's minds even now. What I love about Portmeirion, the story of why it's here is a great story. The reasons Clough built it and how he built the place. But as well, and it's something that's hardly been touched on, is the 100 years of exciting things that have happened here. And to me, that makes the place come alive.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's every year somebody will come and say, I came here and so-and-so was here. I stayed here and we had dinner on the night. The story why it's here is Portmeirion here is a great story, Steve. Why Clough had this great vision as a 23-year-old to build it. Then waited 20 years to find the location, and then found the location and spent 50 years building it. But for me, what makes this place so exciting is the stories that pretty much have never been written about. It's the 100 years of this, and famous people been coming here from day one. And it was designed to be an inspiration for creative people. And I think when you hear about all the famous people who've been here, for me, on top of that list is George, because he really got Portmeirion. He knew he could totally get what Clough was trying to do. Work with nature. Really? Work with nature? Yes, work with nature. Because by working with nature, you're creating something that you're saving nature, but also showing people how beautiful it is. And I think of all the Beatles, George was my hero for totally getting that.
And you can see why George fell in love with the play, because it just fits in perfectly with George's character.
Oh, yeah. That's so true. Yeah. When we were talking in our earlier interview, that was exactly my thought, that it's a perfect place for him.
Absolutely. And also, you think of it going there 67, 69, and how the world was. You can imagine just how exciting the place was. But it's actually exciting now, because when you enter Portmeirion, you really do feel you're leaving the world behind. I know it sounds bizarre, but it's such an escapism place, and it's the most beautiful place. And as I thought, we thought we knew all the stories, and then Meurig was coming out with more stories. And another one I thought was really funny was your Mick and Keith story, Meurig.
Yeah, sure. We've got, well, a key in that right across the estuary is where Lord Harlett lives now, but his grandfather was the Lord Harlett who was the British ambassador to America, of course. And his son was a little bit wayward in the sort of 60s and 70s, shall we say. And so to try and get him to control himself a little bit better, the Lord Harlech at the time would invite his son to come back, come stay, come away from London and the swinging 60s and all that, come back to Wales. And he did, but he brought all his mates with him, which was brilliant. And Maggie, my partner, she remembers she was the coalman's daughter, and she remembers going to deliver coal to Lord Alice's house, and Eric Clapton was chopping logs there. It's just a surreal thing. But the story I told Keith, and I absolutely love, is this is a very rural area. Okay, so many of the farmers and stuff here, their life was all here. They would never go even to Liverpool. And there were two brothers who farmed right up the hill where opposite Portmeirion, where we live. And their only pleasure in life, apart from their work and where they lived, was going down every night to the local public house, and having a half a stout each there. And they would do this every night. And then they'd catch up with their friends, and then they'd go back home. And this one particular night, they had a modest minor van, which is quite a beautiful but quite primitive van, okay? But it's very much a car of the 60s. And this one particular night, they'd been down for their drink, and they then were driving back up. And where Lord Hallett's house is, there's another mansion house. My house is between the two, and it's Plas Llandecwyn. And it was a part of the Wilkinson Sword family that lived there. But they, of course, were very much they moved in the same circles as Lord Hallett. They knew these famous people. And it's beautiful. Plas Llandecwyn is a massive house with an amazing view from it. And anyway, these farmers had to drive past Plas Llandecwyn to go back to their farm. And this one particular night, it was starting to rain, and they were driving home, and there was a couple on the side of the road. So they stopped. And they said, "Oh, where are you going?" And they said, "Oh, we're going to Plas Llandecwyn." And they said, "Oh, would you like to get in? We'll give you a lift." And they said, "Oh, thank you." So they got in the back of this farming van, opened the back doors, and they climbed in the back. And anyway, they took them up to Plas Llandecwyn. And then they got out, and they said, "Oh, thank you very much. They saved us walking in the rain." And then the two farmers went home. The following night, they went back down to the pub and said, "Oh, we gave this couple a lovely lift home last night. They were lovely people." And because it was starting to rain, and anyway, they thanked us by giving us a cigarette, and it was the best night's sleep that we've ever had.
Oh my!
These are two people who would not know what a joint is. Okay, so they had their cigarette, and it was Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull.
Oh my!
Dr. Mike Faithfull, yeah.
Oh wow!
Yeah. How cool! Mick and Marianne, how cool!
Yeah, really. Has Keith ever been there?
I've never heard of Keith coming, no. The one, since I met Keith, our Keith here, another gentleman came to the Steampunk Festival, not this weekend, weekend before. And he came up to me, because I've been on radio and stuff to talk about the Beatles connections in North Wales. And he said, "I've got something that you'd like to see." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he gets his phone out, and it was a picture of Mark Bolan at the Plas Llandecwyn. And Mark Bolan had given him a present, a gift, a motorbike. And he's still got this motorbike that this guy has. And it was unbelievable. In this area that I know and love, a young, early 70s, so yeah, a youngish Mark Bolan, pre-fame, anyway, definitely, because he was a mod, of course, in the 60s, wasn't he? There with this motorbike. So incredible, really, that we have so many famous people. Oh, Nick Fleetwood came as well at the same time, apparently, as Mark Bolan, yeah, to stay because of the connection with Lord Hallett and the Wilkinson Sword family in Plas Llandecwyn.
I would think that Who would have been very much at home there. Has Pete Townsend or Roger Daltrey been there?
I would love to hear the story about that, but I haven't heard one yet. Yeah, I'm a huge Who fan, and I don't know. Simon Townsend, Paul, his brother, one of the first concerts I organised here. And I should have asked him, because he came back. He loved the place, Simon did. But I haven't met people to ask him that. But if I ever do, it'll be on the top of my list.
Because the place itself it's got, so we were, Meurig and I Mary Kay, we were discussing it. And it just seems as if there's so many untold stories. Because you mentioned Portmeirion, and they go, oh, yeah, good, lovely place, and The Prisoner. And then you realise there's so many other stories which have never been documented. Another story which Meurig was telling us was there even Debbie Harry.
Debbie Harry's been there?
No, Debbie Harry didn't come here. But
story, yeah.
Yeah. So again, the Cape Club, okay? So the Cape Club started in 2013. And then when I would meet people, and if I thought that the Prisoner fans or Portmeirion fans, I'd offer them a cape. Anyway, so Glenn Matlock had a cape. Of course he did. Huge fan. And he then became the Blondies bassist in 2020. And he phoned me and said, I'm going to become Blondies bassist. I'm going to record an album with them and I'm going to be touring with them. Debbie's asking if she can be in the Cape Club. So again, having lifted myself off the floor, as a huge Debbie Harry fan, I thought, yeah, no problem with that at all. So I got Karen to make me a cake, did the badges in Scotland and got them down, did the certificates, sent them over to Glenn. Glenn took them over. And I have a photo of Debbie Harry wearing her cape on the fire escape of their New York recording studio. And it was just lovely. But fans of The Prisoner, what amazes me with The Prisoner is that it was so influential from so many different people, different styles of people, from actors to writers to musicians, that really got what Patrick was trying to do, which is tapping into the Cold War paranoia day but making it quite a bit different. And then the year after, Debbie became number 442 because of the Club 442 song on the first album. Of course, I had to give her a special badge for that one. Glenn then phones me back and says, I've got Glenn Burke on the phone, and he's asking why is Debbie in the Cape Club when he isn't in the Cape Club, because he was the Beatles fan. He's the sort of 60s guy. He loved everything, the 60s. So I said, yes, of course, Clem could be in the Cape Club. I went down to Cardiff Castle when they were playing there. And then the other thing was smuggled in backstage by a Sex Pistol, which is, I always love that idea, to present Clem with his cape. And they've got some lovely photos of that as well. That's the nice thing about this thing. It's only a bit of fun, but you never know when it's going to end.
Really? Exactly, yeah. What I think is amazing, but I shouldn't really be surprised, is that The Prisoner, new generations of fans are tuning into it and they're falling in love with it. And that is pretty amazing. And then, of course, people go to the village because they want to see where it's filmed, and they fall in love with the place as well.
Yeah.
That I find really impressive, because I've been there, I think 4 times now, and it's such a beautiful place.
Yeah,
it is. And I advise everyone to go there if they've never been.
Yeah. I guess our challenge is getting people here for the first time, and The Prisoner may well be the hook that might bring them here for the first time. Yeah. But when they then come, they hopefully fall in love with the place as it is. And what's amazing, we get 8 or 10 film crews a year doing documentaries about us mainly. Even now, after 60 years, the presenter still wants to be chased by Rover. He'll still want to ride in the Mini Moke. It's still very much in people's minds. You know? Sometimes we even do the free-for-all election parade. We reenact them for them to be the 2 jousting people on the balcony of the Glorietta. I'm not a number, I'm a free man. But so, it's incredibly ahead of its day, and still people find it intriguing now, which is great.
I assume that it looks exactly like it did when they filmed. Is that correct? Or
the only thing that's changed is the chessboard is a permanent fixture now, as opposed to the boards they were just put out when we're doing it. And that we did that in 2017, because before then I was getting emails nearly every week in the summer. I was so disappointed it came to Portmeirion and you didn't have the human chess on, as if we could afford to employ 32 people to stand there as chess pieces every day. We put the chessboard as a permanent fixture, and there's chess pieces there for people to play now. But of course, when we're filming, we know we do get people in to put the capes on, and we will reenact the human chess.
Do you reenact anything else from the series?
The free-for-all election parade is also done. So where they do a parade from Battery Square, and then vote for number 6, go for number 6, going around the piazza, and then number 6 and number 2, the wonderful verbal jousting they have on the balcony there.
And also the beach as well. That's something else which, again, Meurig was telling me, because I had to ask, was the boat by the beach. And I said to Meurig, is that the actual boat that was seen in the series, in the episode? And Meurig assured me it's the actual boat, isn't it?
Yeah, so Clough had an actual boat moored by the hotel as a hotel room, and he thought nice romantic place to stay with the bobbing of the waves. But unfortunately, it sank in a big storm in 1930, and it sank 2/3 of the way to the island, which is in the middle of the estuary. And he couldn't refloat the boat, so he dragged it back, cut the mast and cabins off it, and then built the boat as a part of the quayside. And on low tide, you will see part of the original boat is still sticking out the sand. It's about 20 metres off the quayside there. But the hotel was the old people's home in the prison, of course, and he plays chess with the sea captain on the lawn. And while he's doing that, there's old people climbing up and down the mast of the boat behind him for no reason, just to add to the sort of surrealness of it all. Why would they be doing that? Why not? And that's what I love about The Prisoner. It works on so many levels. There's always something that maybe you haven't seen before, and you maybe question it, which is always great too.
And the underlying meaning that they got out of the script is just incredible. And in fact, some of that applies right now. It's pretty weird that it still applies.
So, yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely.
It's absolutely amazing. Is there any other Beatles stories you have, Meurig?
George here for his 50th, and he came in a car, his own car, and he opened the boot, and there was just ukuleles in the back of it, and his clothes came in a separate vehicle. And he wanted to stay in Watch House, which is the most popular cottage right on the cliff edge. And they thought, yes, that would be a nice place to stay for his 50th. But his security went to look at it and thought it was a bit too precarious because there's handrails there now. There wasn't handrails back in the day. So they persuaded George to stay in the Peacock Suite, the penthouse, which is in the main hotel. And I always find that funny because was it just the security's job to make sure he didn't fall off the cliff edge? And he had a good time. But anyway, he stayed in the Peacock Suite and he enjoyed himself. And so that's right. But I always love the idea that he wanted to stay. Well, why shouldn't he be allowed to stay there on his 50th? But it's a lovely room. And I think Keith's going to stay in that one or in the Peacock Suite next time we come over, I think.
Definitely. Absolutely. The place is just so beautiful. It really is so beautiful. And of course, Mary's wonderful tour last week. It's such a beautiful place. I've been telling everyone that. I knew the place was beautiful, but to actually go there and see much more, which I did, thanks to Mary, to see much more of the place, then you realise, then you can see why Patrick fell in love with it. You can see why Brian fell in love with it. You can see why George fell in love with it. All of them. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And then you've got them great Pathé News films, one from 1963. And there's Clough, and it's talking about the place. It's the most amazing place to escape to. It really is. It really is.
I've never seen that 1963 film. Is that on YouTube?
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Also, check out, I'm fairly certain it's on YouTube somewhere, a BBC programme called A Love Affair with Light that Clough did in 1969. And that's a half-an-hour programme of him talking about why he did Portmeirion. It's the best half-an-hour programme there is of him talking about the place. I would imagine that's on YouTube somewhere as well. Definitely.
Yeah. And he's talking about why, like Meurig knows, it's him talking about the influences and everything about the building of it. And I was amazed to discover that, and again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. He was still working on it until 1973, is that correct?
Later than that, actually. There was one building that he designed called the Lion that was never built, but he did build the entrance to it, the arch. And then there's a crest on top with a lion and the unicorn on it. The unicorn next door was built, and the lion was never built. And he was working on this in 1976. But he was becoming ill. He lived until he was nearly 95. But we've got an interview with him saying if anything else should be built, it should only be the lion. And my hope was that we could have built it for the centenary, because to close the story of Portmeirion on the 100 years, I think would have been a lovely story in its own right. But the trust were a bit nervous of doing it because, if we did it, we're changing Portmeirion. But my argument was, if he hadn't become ill or died, he would have done it. And he started to build it, and we got the plans. So maybe one day it'll get built. I hope it does. I think it would be a lovely testament to close the story, really, because the story of why he did this is lovely, and it's been covered many times in many books and films. But the extra bit for me is the things that have happened here with all these creative people coming here. And it's just but you totally get how creative people would be inspired by coming to here. And I think, but I'm trying to learn more and more about the more unusual stories about the people, the famous people who've come here, who were inspired by the place. And I think that's something for the future, hopefully.
Absolutely. You've got, and also you pointed out to us, you've got a famous prop, a film prop on one of the areas. Was it Inn of the Sixth Happiness?
Oh, yes, we do. Yeah, the Buddha. So as you walk into the village into Battery Square, underneath the dome, there's a blue building and there's a Buddha, a big 6-7 foot Buddha, and painted gold. And it's a prop from the film The Inn of the Sixth Happiness that was filmed locally with Ingrid Bergman in 1958. And they built a replica of the Great Wall of China in Bedd Geraint, which is 7 miles from here. And then at the end of the filming, they filmed a little bit on Clough's land in Plas Montano. And they offered Clough the Buddha. And of course, he was accepting everything. And his first plan was to build a big temple in our headland for the Buddha to stand on. But then he thought nobody would see it. So that's why the Buddha is in a building underneath the dome right in Battery Square.
I was amazed when you showed me that. I thought, wow, look at that. It's so much to take in. And that's another thing. When I tell people when they go there for the first time, you just can't see it all in one go. So much to take in.
And his attention to detail was huge. He wanted people to come back and see something new. So he went into real intense detail on every single building, be it a painted window with a face in it or tiered painting to make it look old and damp. He would design buildings with a wavy roof as if it's going to fall down, just to make people think it's been here for hundreds of years, not the 100 years that it has been here. But he wanted people to come back and see something new every time they come. A gentleman turned up a couple of years ago and he had 65 partial photographs of some of the statues and carvings and paintings here. And he came to the managing director, who's Klaus Ganson, and I, and said, you can use this as a treasure hunt if you want. And we all went through all 65 photos and we both got 63 of them, no problem. And we were both stuck on the same 2. And we thought, he's thrown those in, those aren't here. But they were down by the swimming pool. His attention to detail was phenomenal. And it's great that he had this idea, make architecture fun, but also make it so that people can appreciate it time and time again. And that's what people do.
Absolutely. And it's funny, we know that George has so much love for Portmeirion, and then he goes and buys something like Friar Park. You can see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is a similarity there, isn't there?
I love the story when Clough and Frank Lloyd Wright became great friends. They met in 19 on a cruise to Russia to an architecture conference. And then in 1956, Frank Lloyd Wright came to Wales because his mother was Welsh and he was looking at where his family and ancestors had lived. And he came here and Clough gave him a tour and then introduced him to his wife, Amabel. And Frank Lloyd Wright said, I believe you've married an architect. In Clough's eyes, that was like the greatest compliment that you get from the superstar architect of the day. And it was only then that his wife realised, okay, maybe he's doing something right, because she was very critical of him in the first 25 years that he was using all his money to build this. But then when Frank Lloyd Wright said that, she thought, okay, maybe he's doing something right.
Wow.
Yeah, really. Go ahead, Keith.
There's one other story which I'd love Meurig to tell us, is that picture of the 4 buildings with the colour.
Yeah. So basically, we're not 100% which way around this happened, but what we do know, between the main dome and the onion dome next to it is the row that Clough built that made it look as a small Portofino. Because he arrived in Portofino by boat, he opened the windows from the boat, looked up at the coloured terraces and thought, if I do this, I want to do as a homage to Portofino. So he designed between the 2 domes this row of buildings, and it looks like 4 cottages. But then everything here is built smaller than it should be, so the top row windows are painted on to make it look bigger than it actually is. But in 1967, the 4 colours were the same 4 colours that the Beatles had coats for on Sgt. Pepper. Now, one of the colours has changed, so there's only 3 of the 4. But we don't know how that happened. Was it the fact that because Clough would change the colours of the buildings if he would try different colours out. So did Clough do it because of the 4 colours and the Beatles connections here with Sgt. Pepper? Or I wouldn't have thought the Beatles got their jackets to fit the cottages. I wouldn't have thought. But that's what it was back in the day and in 67. And I just love that idea. That's another sort of connection that we have here with them.
Absolutely amazing.
Meurig, I was just curious, especially if anybody is interested, do you guys have a gift shop? Do you sell souvenirs?
Well, we do. And we have the only physical prisoner shop in the world. Yeah. So number 6's house in the series is now the prisoner shop. So you go in and we bought one of his jackets. So that's framed on the wall. And you can see many of the sunglasses and some of the props they used in the series itself there. But of course, we sell lots as well. So we've got loads of T-shirts with different Portmeirion prisoner logos and things on them. Obviously, we sell the DVDs, and we used to sell the soundtracks as well.
But I'm gonna have to send for something. Do you have? Is the gift shop? Or is it on the internet that people can?
It's online. Yes, you can go to Portmeirion online and just put one of the sections that comes up is prisoner, and you can buy all sorts there. Yeah.
Okay. That's
when I was there, Meurig took a great picture of Kay and I outside the prisoner shop with a large cutout of Patrick.
You did send that. That was, I saw that. That was great with you and Kay and Patrick. That was wonderful.
When they go down the village, obviously we've got a 1967 Mini Moke that was here when they filmed The Prisoner, and we've had it done up to look exactly like The Prisoner one. It's got the penny farthing, the stripy canvas and stuff as well. And so, yes, I do sometimes have to dress up. I have the prisoner jacket. I'm number 143. Don't ask me why. I don't know why I'm 143. But then, of course, this is a 100-year-old Woodrow of London boater I was given. And what I love about it, of course, is the Portmeirion green sash on it, which is fantastic. I did a prisoner tour for the crew, and they said, "What do you want afterwards?" And I said, "I don't want anything." They said, "Okay, we'll send you something." And 2 weeks later, they sent me a penny farthing bike. So I've got a penny farthing bike as well.
Oh, my.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Have you ridden it around out there?
I'm a brave man, but I'm not that brave because we're on hills here and there's no brakes on it. And I have this vision that it would end up in the estuary. So I've never ridden it.
Oh, my. I want to keep this going.
I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go on, please.
Go ahead, Meurig.
No, I've got a nice story to finish off with. But if you're going to say something before then, go.
I always have to thank our friends Steve and Gloria Holmes for kickstarting and getting me to meet Meurig. So it's really nice to thank those two. And the other thing as well, which I thought was amazing, because when Meurig and I and Kay were finishing last week, we were thinking, hold on a second, why would Wilfred have gone there? I'm pretty sure, unless I'm wrong, if you look at that picture that we've got, I reckon it was a very good chance that Brian and Wilfred had a chat about this during the filming of Hard Day's Night.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say that's very likely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you look at that picture? Yeah, sorry, yeah, please.
So that picture, as far as we know, is 65, because that's the copy we've got. It was in the hotel, and it was taken by the wife of the head barman at the time. And this morning, the local farmer, who's our tenant farmer, who's worked here all through the 60s, he knew Epstein, I think. And he said, "Oh yeah, it was Rumble." Yeah, he loved sitting on the lawn in front of the hotel, and he would sit there for hours with a drink, just taking in the surroundings. And I thought, lovely, and I can imagine that. It would be great. We don't know where he stayed. As far as we know, he stayed mainly in the hotel. But yeah, and he came in a few times, I believe, which is great.
And it just makes you think how much else we've yet to uncover about Portmeirion.
It was only, 7 days ago, this guy turned up with his photo of Mark Bolan with a motorbike they'd given him as a present over there. Yeah. So it's still happening, isn't it? I've done radio shows and stuff in the UK about the Beatles stories in North Wales because, people know a lot of the Beatles stories, but the Portmeirion part of it, or the Harlow part with George and Paul from 58 onwards, nobody really knows those stories. It's important for us because we're all proud of the area we live in. But of course, then you realise that pre-Beatles, George and Paul were coming to Harlow and they were jamming with the Vikings, and when the Vikings are still alive and I know him well. And then it's the fact that the Beatles here, and then they've got all these other stories with Jagger and Clapton and everybody only across the estuary there. So I think this area, I've often thought, I wish I would have been alive in the 60s because I would have loved to have been here with It must have been such a happening place. But a lot of that goes back to Danger Man, 59 and 60.
Yeah.
Then Eppie coming here. Eppie telling his mates to come here. And Twiggy and all these people were coming back in the day. And I think that's, of all the times I wish I'd been alive, I wish I'd been here doing this job in the 60s, because I think it must have been so exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people are still alive, and that's the nice thing now, is talking to these people. So I've been trying to collate this information, because unfortunately we're talking 60 years ago and people are leaving us. And unfortunately there are stories that are dying with them. And I'd hate for that to happen. So I started a couple of years ago doing like bullet points of some of these stories, because I don't want those stories to be lost. So at least, hopefully, after me, if I get a chance to write them properly one day, that as recollections, people will look back at this time, especially the 60s, which I absolutely adore, because it was such a exciting time in the particular swinging 60s. But Portmeirion was a part of that, but a lot of that was down to Patrick and Danger Man, and then of course the Prisoner. So fantastic.
And also, of course, as we know, the Beatles were in Bangor when they heard about Brian's death.
That's another thing for next year. I've been talking to a friend of mine who works with the BBC Radio, that we should do something about that, and maybe bring in the stories that they played, the 4 nights they played in Llandudno in 63, and they played in Prestatyn and Rhyl before that. But there's a lot of Beatles connections in North Wales that people, if you look, you'll find the majority of them. But you won't find the ones in Portmeirion, or you won't find the ones with other famous people of that time across the road with Lord Halifax. But maybe we should do something, because it was, we all love that period. And when you hear these stories, I can't stop hearing these stories without having a smile on. Jagger was giving the 2 farmers who didn't know what a joint was a joint. And it's just fantastic, isn't it? And the fact that, again, so many famous people, actors, and also here in the 60s as well, it was must have been a fantastic time to be here. But the story I had as a finishing story for you was that Buff, towards the end of his life, would sit on a wall in front of the colonnade right in the middle of the village, where the chesswood is now. And he would talk to people why he did this. And I would have loved to have done that with him. Although I did sing to him in the school choir in 1976. But it wasn't a conversation. At least I sang on the colonnade and he was in the audience. But I've spoken to many people who did. And he was so chuffed to have an idea as grand as to do this when he was only 23 and still be doing it 70 years later is a testament to him. And so the 20 years of finding a location, then finding it and buying it, and then spending 50 years building it.
Did the Prisoner film everything there?
All the external shots were done here. All the internal shots were in Boreham Wood in London.
Okay.
So it's only the external shots that we had here. So they filmed for a month, September 66, and then a month in March 67. They only had they run out of time because he was dragged away to film Ice Station Zebra in the middle of filming The Prisoner. So that's why in one of the episodes his mind is put into another character being science fiction. So the other character is the rebel in that one episode. But they did think about doing 24, but then didn't have time. 17 was the minimum America would accept as a series. So that's why they did 17. I was on TV on Thursday. Paul Merton, who was a British comedian, and he's a satirist, and he's on television a lot, and he filmed here last year. And with all the filming I've done over the years, you could tell in the first sentence, because all the presenters would say, "Oh, I'm a huge fan of The Prisoner." And you can tell that they've maybe seen one episode, but not Paul Merton. His opening sentence to me was, "So tell me, Meurig, which is the best order to watch the 17 episodes? In the order it was shown, or in the order it was filmed, the Alex Cox version?" And of course, it's the order it was filmed, because what happened was they did 13 episodes that made sense, and then they were getting so much pressure to film the last 4 when they filmed them, didn't make any sense. They're the surreal ones, totally. But they couldn't show it in the order it was filmed because nobody would get it. That's why the last 4 episodes, they make no sense. So they threw those episodes in the series. And that's why the 4 that don't make sense are scattered through it. But of course, 4 that is the last one, of course. And I thought then, because of all the TV I've done over the years, nobody's ever put that as an idea, because if you do watch it in the order it was filmed, it makes much more sense. Apart from the last 4, which aren't supposed to make sense. So that's the whole point, that they were left there to be questionable. But we still have the prisoner convention every April, and they still have discussion groups. Even now, 60 years later, what do you think he meant in this episode? If you don't know now, we're never going to know. That's the whole point, isn't it? But yeah, fantastic. It's something that is still inspiring even now.
Just for people that don't know exactly where Portmeirion is, where is it exactly located?
So we are Northwest Wales. Pandemic, we had a lot of Americans come and see us. We're not the easiest place to get to, but what I would recommend anybody is come by train, because London, Euston to Bangor is 3 hours 20, and then a taxi from Bangor to here is 30 minutes. There is a train line that does the Mid-Wales route that stops at the end of our drive, but it takes hours, double the length of time than Euston to Bangor, because it stops off in so many places. But that goes through Birmingham, Machynlleth, and ends up here. So that's the easiest way of getting here. You can also come by car as well, of course. We're not the easiest place to get to, but what we tend to find, people have a good time when they come. So it's worth the journey. We always had America was always one of our biggest international audiences, pre-pandemic. Less so much nowadays, but I think the world has changed a bit since then. But so Northwest Wales by Portmeirion.
The earliest Beatles sighting at Portmeirion was when?
I can't tell you an exact date for that. We know Epstein was here from 60, but the hotel fire in 1981, we lost pretty much all the paperwork, all the guest books and everything like that were destroyed in that fire. And we're gutted by that. Yeah. So I can't give you an exact date, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's all right. Keith, I was going to ask you something I didn't ask you in our interview earlier. What was your best archival find?
Oh, I don't think I have one, because I've got so much pleasure finding so many rare items. I think anything rare they believe lost means a lot to me.
I love that Cilla Black story because you were so descriptive about it. That was just fantastic.
Yeah, that was great.
I was thinking there was maybe another story like that. Do you have another story like that?
Oh, my word. Finding lost Top of the Pops footage is always something special to me. Trying to find footage which the BBC wiped. One off the top of my head was like Jimi Hendrix. I think it's on Top of the Pops 6 times, and the BBC wiped them all. And then I found a clip of him doing Purple Haze from Top of the Pops. I was sitting in like in the Canadian TV archives. That to me was amazing. Finding that was something special to me. Finding lost footage of the King was something special. I think it was obviously finding. In fact, that's Love of the Love clip that we spoke about. The reason why I was looking for the master for that program was because I showed it to Apple during the Beatles anthology, and they were like amazed because they thought that had been wiped, which it had. But as luck would have it, they sent the telerecording over to Australia because they sold the series to Australia, and then they wiped their copy here. So that was amazing to find the master telerecording. The Beatles 4-track appearance on Lucky Stars on Merseyside. That was something really special. And I bet at the end of this program, I'll go away and I'll think of 100.
You can come back. You can come back anytime you want to.
I'll happily come back. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sure there's loads of clips that I'm thinking of. What was also good is I've been doing stuff for Queen, done freelance work for them for 21 years. And I was really pleased to report that I found 4 lost Top of the Pops appearances, 1 Killer Queen, 3 Seven Seas of Rye. Now that was amazing to find someone who had these recorded. So that was pretty special because I was doing it officially, all these are now back in Queen's archives and their bits of them have been used on some of our programs. So that was pretty special to me to find, very special to actually find, especially like Now I'm Here from January 75, which the BBC didn't have. So those are the kind of thing I enjoy. And I love it, mainly specialised in 60s, 70s. Okay. But there's been loads over the years, and I'm obviously still looking now. still looking for rare footage.
I don't want to embarrass you, Keith, but when we were sitting here talking about all the history, I'm thinking Keith should do that. You should do a Portmeirion history.
Fun enough, actually, Meurig and I did discuss this, and Meurig will back me up on this, because of the amount of stories which I thought I knew. Thank you for the compliment, Dave. Very nice here. When I was talking to Meurig last week, and Meurig was coming up with all these stories which I wasn't aware of. And I said to Meurig, he really deserves to be a proper TV program.
That would be good too.
Absolutely. We could explore maybe the Hard Day's Night angle, which I think is amazing. And again, as I was saying to Meurig last week, I reckon if we put maybe a little message out saying, did you stay there? Did you meet any famous people? Or whatever, I reckon there'd be a load of people that will come forward. Because there's going to be so many people that are going to come forward with their prisoner stories. Like Meurig was telling me about Outtakes from the series.
There's two stories there. One was, over the years, I've had about 3 different people come here. I've got these photos, and the photos with the candid photos are when they were filming The Prisoner here. And it was just brilliant. Shots of them rehearsing the chessboard game and then doing the chessboard game. And then a friend of ours has bought 45 minutes, I believe, of outtakes of the rushes of the Prisoner. And so he's keen to do something with that sometime. Maybe, I don't know, it makes sense. Apparently there was an auction that 2 lots were sold. 2 lots of 45 minutes of footage that was filmed but not used, different angles and stuff like that. So maybe that would be, if I don't know who the other person is, but this guy does, so maybe something like that would be of interest, wouldn't it? To have 90 minutes of different angles of some of the prisoner shots of that. It would be fantastic.
Guys, I don't want this to end. I really don't. Go ahead, Meurig.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
And I'm throwing this out to everybody out there. There is a photograph of George.
Oh, yeah.
Stand underneath Gatehouse, right? Eppie's Place. And he's pretending to climb up the rock underneath it. Now, 2 people have told me about this photograph, and 2 independent people, and they're people I trust. I've never seen this photograph, and I've been looking for years. So please, if anybody out there knows where this photo is, and apparently it's either in a book or in a magazine, I think both of them have definitely seen it, but they didn't have it, and they didn't know where it came from. So if anybody thinks they've got one, please do. I would love to see that, because we don't know when it's from. It could be from 69 when you see it, or it could be from the 60s, early in the 60s. But it definitely exists, and it's definitely him standing in front of the arch that's underneath Gatehouse, and there's a bank that goes up, and he's pretending to climb up it. So please, if anybody out there knows this photograph or where we can see it, I would love to see it, because it's been driving me mad for the last few years.
You want to, I'll give my email if anybody wants to contact me, but do you want to give your email?
Please do. Yeah, sure. It's Welsh. So it's Meurig, so Meurig at Portmeirion, Portmeirion -village.com.
There you go.
I'll say that again. Meurig at Portmeirion, Portmeirion -village.com.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I can't say enough. This has been so much fun. I'll be talking to you. I know I'll hear all these wonderful stories. And anytime something else comes up that, if you guys find something, Beatle related, I would love to break it. I would have you guys on. I really, really would.
Yeah. Well, and you're both stars.
Thank you all. It's been a very great afternoon, and I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, let's hope we'll find some more stuff.
Okay.
And I look forward, and just stay in touch. And thank you again for last week, Meurig. Really good.
Pleasure. No problem.
Okay. Again, this has been wonderful, and I'm gonna say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. What can I do to end this but say, be seeing you?
Be seeing you.
Be seeing you. Keep that one. Mark it fab.